This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland.
Over the years, many Irish missionary sisters have done Trojan work among disadvantaged communities in Africa. This is a few of their stories, the stories of unsung Irish heroines in Africa.
What kept me going was the thought of Africa. I had entered for Africa and I was going to go to Africa.
Irish people that time, we knew what it was to be deprived, and they saw another people like ourselves, and therefore they went to the help.
We were very conscious of an oppressed people, and so there was a lot of that in it.
When I entered Kilishandra, there was no goal, there was no concern, there was no APSO, there was no Viatoris Christi.
A human life, that you could save a human life, if possible, if God would help you strong enough. That was the thing.
Life was very enriching, and you felt you were trying to help a nation that deserved to be helped and to get on, and it would be a blessing to their country and to their people later on.
I'm Paul Wright and welcome to the second programme of Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa. Now, in our last programme we heard various Irish women relate their experiences working among disadvantaged communities in Africa down the years. Given such tough work, a strong belief in providence is often necessary. Miriam Duggan, a Franciscan missionary sister and medical doctor, discovered this fact in the 1980s when the hospital compound in the Ugandan capital of Kampala, where she worked, was one day deluged by thousands of refugees seeking sanctuary from the civil war raging all around them.
I suppose it would have been at the time during the second coup in Uganda when we had thousands of refugees in the hospital compound because they had run there for safety, and we were really run out of food. We had one, if we would say, sack of, you would say, millie meal left, and the sister who was in charge came to me and said, "What do we do?" And I said, "Okay, make a gruel and give something to everybody, as much as you can, and we'll hope for tomorrow." And we just didn't know where the next lot of food would come. And the next day, the Red Cross got through to us, and with supplies and food and everything else. And it was really sort of trusting in providence at that time that I really believe that the Lord doesn't let you down. And the very next day, they got through and arrived in with a lorry load of food to help us out with. We were able to feed everybody. So it sort of was an answer to prayer at that time, because we just didn't know what we would do the next day. Well, I think that's often the situation, that you just have to really trust, and you're often put to that pin of your faith, if you like, and somehow the Lord doesn't let you down and turns up at the last minute, but maybe tests your faith up to that.
Mary Coleman, a Holy Rosary missionary sister, worked with thousands of displaced refugees from war-torn Sierra Leone. She recently met up again with one refugee that she'd known in West Africa.
I met when I was in Liberia last week or the week before. She was a nice young woman, and now she's one of the people in the programme. She's training people how to sew. And she learned herself in Guinea. She was in a place called Foya, and she had two little boys, and they had gone down to the market for shopping for her, to buy there what you need for the day in the way of greens or vegetables. And she had a little baby on her back. It was less than 2 years. And while that was happening, the rebels entered the village and everybody scattered, and she lost her children. And she went through the bush for days and days and met people, and she couldn't find them. And eventually she had to cross into Guinea. She was raped at the border with the crossing with the Guinea soldiers. And she lived in refuge for a number of years and came to our programme and learned how to tailor and how to make uniforms for children in school, and that's how she's making her living now. Then when the war was over and they were rehoused back in Liberia, she came back. And about 2 months ago, a woman came to her and she said, "I think I know where your 2 boys are." And she gave her the information, and she went to the place, and they were her 2 boys. One was only about 3 or 4, he didn't remember anything. The bigger one was to always tell him, "Someday we'll find our mother." The father was killed. And now she has the 2 boys back with her. And the little one that was on her back now they're grown up, they're in their teens now.
That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Talk about, God, life can be good at times.
Of those stories, but that's one that's just very vivid for me. And she's now has those, she's sending in to school, she's making uniforms, she's teaching others how to do tailoring. And that's her life.
Margaret Josephine Boyle, a Franciscan Missionary sister, worked in a government hospital in Sioma, situated just a mile or so from the Zambezi River in Zambia. The Sioma Medical Clinic was only a few miles, as the crow flies, from the larger state hospital which lay on the other side of the Zambezi River. The normal mode of transport across the Zambezi River was by pontoon ferry.
I'll tell you another story, if I may. You had to cross a pontoon to get to the hospital. That means a pontoon for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes on a pontoon. So anyway, this night, and it didn't travel at night, but I was told that if you arranged or called the army, they would take you across in an emergency. So this woman had been in labour for a long time. So she came in, nothing could be done. Fetal heart was present, so I made for the army, and I said maybe they'd bring us across. So it was night at this time, and it's dark at 7 o'clock. So by the time I got the army, the driver was with me, and she was sitting beside me in the front. And when I ran out and took the driver to see could I find the army men, and when I came back down, lo and behold, the woman was positioned with the feet around the wheel and the baby was coming. And the pack and everything was under where she was. We were sitting, you could put the seat down, and that's where all the utensils were. So anyway, the army man was there. I said, anybody, even the blanket to put her, and it was cold at night, I had to ask the army man, would he take off his coat, sacrifice taking off his army coat, and I'd wash it and return it to him. But I wanted something to wrap the baby in, which I did. And somebody had a bit of a cord they produced until I got the utensils out, and they cut the cord, and the baby was crying, having been in labour 4 days at home. And in the middle of that, I was standing in the middle of the pontoon, and they danced around me in Thanksgiving. So I said, if anyone saw me in the middle of the night, and they were having a great dance around me. Thanking me. This was a very special baby. And
Brilliant.
Back we turned the car. We didn't have to go around. Back we came. And when we came back, this will tell you about the hospitality of the people. The mothers that were waiting in the rooms, they got the water and they washed her and they put her into a nice clean bed, and she thought she was in heaven. And we put the baby in the cot. And that was a miracle, a very definite miracle.
Beautiful. Isn't it fantastic? But it really, it's
that
going to
child was called Pontoon. Pontoon came to the clinic, and we'll see it coming to the clinic for all its injections and what have you, and Pontoon was on the card. That was his name, Pontoon.
God,
They call the Pontoon is the thing they put down for getting across, you know. And the baby was brilliant, nothing wrong with the baby. And the woman herself, she wasn't out dancing, but she was so happy that she had a live baby, and didn't matter anything else. And we turned around and came home. Again, to see the celebration when she came home, I thought I'd be coming in now to a place to be all asleep. They heard the jeep coming in, all up, see what happened. Did you get there or what happened? And this is what happened, the water and the washing her there and there. And the women are able to walk her, you know, they no sympathy for themselves. They can just, this is their honeymoon, they enjoy the bed and the rest.
In the mid-1980s, Ethiopia's economy was in massive decline, and widespread famine struck that country, while hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians faced starvation. Maura O'Donoghue, a medical missionary of Mary, got deeply involved in famine relief work.
Initially I got involved, I was recovering from malaria and I went to convalesce in a nearby area. And while I was there, I heard all these rumours about people dying from famine and, that famine was raging, etc. And I said, well, I can't sit here twiddling my thumbs if people are out there dying. So I got up and I went out and I did a survey. And you see, it was a communist regime, as we've said, so they did not want to admit that there was a famine in Ethiopia at the time because they had deposed Haile Selassie on the basis of famine, that he hadn't done anything for the people with famine raging at the time, in his time. So this was 10 years later and they did not want to admit that they had famine again.
In Ethiopia, 7 million people are threatened by starvation. Thousands have already died.
Thousands of wasted people are coming here for help. Many find only death. They flood in every day from villages hundreds of miles away, dulled by hunger, driven beyond the point of desperation.
The famine caused by drought is the worst in living memory, and now the rains have failed again for the third year in succession.
The rains didn't come, so the crops didn't grow. People are starving and desperate.
So anyway, I went and I did the survey and went along, got the bishop to come with me, the local bishop. I said, we'll have to do something about this. And he said, well, what will we do? And I said, well, we better go along and present the figures and the facts. So he reluctantly came with me and we sat down and I said, look, I've done a survey and these are the facts. And, of course, they would have been afraid that I would publicise them. So it was a question of responding then to... And he said, well, what will you do about it? He said, can you start a programme? So I said, well, yes, if I have the food and the equipment, etc. And he said, well, I'll give you 6 bags of powdered milk. And he said... You can return that to me when you get milk, but I'll give you 6 bags of powdered milk, 50 kilos each, and you can start a programme. And he designated the place for 7,500 people. And I looked at him, and the bishop was beside me. I said, no way I'm going to start a famine relief programme with 6 bags of milk for 7,500 people. I said, I'd be raising false expectations. And the bishop kicked me under the table as much as they stop. So he said, well, what will you do? I said, I'll go to Addis and see can I get food and equipment and see what can I get. I said, I need transport as well. So I went to Addis. I got a loan of a Land Rover for 6 weeks from another organisation, from CRS. I got a whole lot of food, and I had to arrange for a truck to take it down, and I'd arranged a store at the mission which was able to take it for me. And I got a whole lot of equipment, and I got the money to pay for by going around begging from the different agencies and different people in Addis Ababa. So I went back and I started off with the 7,500 people. But of course, when other areas heard there was food, in 6 weeks' time I was reaching over 36,000 people.
36,000, just yourself and how many colleagues did you have? Many assistants?
I had one nurse, and I asked teachers, the Daughters of Charity were running a kindergarten training school for teachers, and I went to them and I said, look, you can't go on teaching, doing teacher training with the famine going on. Can you give me these students to come out and I'll train them? And they came with them, the two teachers came with those students, and we went out, and I spent a weekend teaching them what to do, how to weigh and to measure and to monitor and all the rest of it. And we were reaching with 10 students, one nurse and 2 other teachers, the teacher trainers. We reached 36,000 in 6 weeks.
And Maura O'Donoghue had this to say about just how desperate the mid-1980s Ethiopian famine really was.
Well, I was in several different areas because when I was doing that programme, I was asked to go to Addis Ababa by the Catholic Secretariat Church, Catholic Secretariat, to try to coordinate famine relief. I was called out one day from Addis Ababa to a health centre that was being run by another group of sisters. They had cholera, and they didn't know how to cope with it. It was new to them, naturally, and they had a mess every place. The patients were in every room, in operating rooms, in laboratory, in everywhere. They were out on the grounds with the drips tied up to the fence of the compound, etc., lying on the ground, and you can imagine the mess with cholera. So I said, to the sister in charge, I said, sister, we better. I said, you have a seminary over there, haven't you? And they said, yes. I said, and how many students are in it? So she said, maybe 150. I said, well, would you go over and get the rector or whoever he is, the director of the seminary, to get those students to go out to the eucalyptus plantation there and cut, and I gave the measurements of the beams I wanted and bring them into me. And I said, do you have any place here in the mission where you have strong material, like calico strong? Oh yes, she said, one of the sisters has bales of that material. I said, great, have you some of you can sew? So we made cholera beds. We then got the patients onto these, and we got a pile of buckets, which I brought down from Addis because I heard, the kind of situation they were in. I brought buckets and basins. So we had the cholera beds, which were holes in the middle of the canvas, and we put the buckets underneath to collect the waste, and we cleaned up the place. We got some more of the men in the area to dig pits for all the waste. We erected a clinic, which was more of these poles with plastic, and the beds inside for those who could have, who needed a bit more attention, if you like. And we had no deaths. The thing was, we were controlling it. We had no deaths. We had enough, like I brought down the supplies, I brought down intravenous fluid, I brought down the buckets and the basins and the plastic. And then the local people provided, the students, etc., provided, cut all these beams, and we got them working. And you see, I told them to cut beams and get Y junction. So, for some of them, for the legs, for the beams. I gave them all the instructions, and they were very intelligent about it. They went out and they brought in all the supplies. So after a weekend, we had them all on beds. After that cholera situation, I was asked to go up to Mekele, which was bordering on Eritrea, it was in Tigray province. And because the sister there, who was running a program, was in a bad way, and she said, would you please come up and help me? So I went up. I didn't know what I was going to face. I went out with her the first morning after arriving. I went out, and again it was a sea of people. There were 100,000 people who had come in because of looking for food from the famine areas, which was widespread there in Tigray province. It was one of the worst affected areas. There were 100,000 people around Mekele town. No sanitation, no water, no anything. So again, I got the college, boys' college there, and I said, look, can we get them out instead of studying to help us? So we got them out. But one of the things that I noticed when I went there, most of the people were out in the open. They had no shelter, and it's very cold at night there. It's the altitude is fairly high, but it's desert area, and desert can be very cold at night, very cold. So they were in the freezing cold as well as no food. Well, they were getting food once they were there, once they were registered. But we tried to do something about the sanitation. We got the people building pit latrines, the students, etc. And when I went round, there were people dying. They were dying, and they were being buried in mass graves. That tells you how severe it was. So I went round to see. I said, look, we have to look at this because there shouldn't be so many dying. And sister brought me down to show where a lot of the people were who had shelter. And the army barracks was there, and they had moved out to let the people have their army barracks. The army barracks meant mud beds, mud brick kind of beds, and close to each other, etc. And the people were going in, the people who got place were being housed there, if you like, and there were about 60 in each of these, as far as I remember. People that they, that was the capacity. Now there might have been more in, but 60 places for people to sleep. So anyway, I went in and I said, Sister Brenda, we will have to empty these buildings. And she said, oh, how could you say that? We can't put them out in the cold. She said, this is the only shelter they have. We can't put... I said, if we don't, every one of them will die. They're all suffering from typhus, which was a contagious disease. So we have to get them out and clean up this place, and then we'd be able to let them back. So we did. And the death rate went down from, like as I say, it was mass graves. There were 60, 70 every day to 10 in a few days. I remember when I came back from Ethiopia during the famine period, going into supermarkets here or whatever, I would be paralysed, and I really mean paralysed because of choice. I would come out, I wouldn't buy anything. And I remember going home, and I was staying with my brother and sister-in-law. I said, look, Bridget, you can ask me to do anything, but don't ask me to go in to do shopping. I can't. I get paralysed with all the choice. I just can't take it. And that was the reality. And I suppose one of the things was that really struck me very forcefully, always, in each of the situations I was in, was how did we manage, particularly with the local people, how could we literally manage to do what we were doing? We couldn't unless there was such goodwill, such very good, strong relationships of solidarity, despite the fact that these people were in such dreadful circumstances. They really helped, and that really kept me going. That kept me going very much.
And you've just been listening to Maura O'Donoghue talk about her famine relief work in Ethiopia in the mid-1980s. This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. Until our next number 3 programme in this 8-part Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa series, from myself, Paul Wright, bye for now.